The grand ballroom of Buckingham Palace sparkled under the crystal chandeliers, but the atmosphere felt heavy with unspoken tension. It was the annual Royal Charity Gala, an event that typically brought the family together in celebration. Yet tonight something was different. Princess Anne stood near the ornate windows, watching the guests mingle below while her mind wandered to concerns that had been weighing on her heart for months. Kate Middleton moved gracefully through the crowd, her emerald dress catching the light as she smiled warmly at the distinguished guests. Despite her composed exterior, she carried a burden that few could see. The past year had been particularly challenging for the royal family, with health scares, public scrutiny, and internal conflicts creating fractures that threatened the very foundation of their unity. Charles, now settled into his role as king, appeared confident as he greeted dignitaries and donors. His regal bearing commanded respect, yet those who knew him well could detect the subtle signs of stress that lined his face. The weight of the crown had brought responsibilities he had prepared for his entire life, but the emotional toll was something no amount of preparation could have anticipated. The evening progressed with the usual protocol and ceremony. Speeches were given about charitable causes close to the royal family's heart. Funds were raised for worthy organizations, and the public face of the monarchy remained as polished as ever. However, beneath the surface, undercurrents of worry flowed through the family members like an invisible tide, and had noticed the changes in her brother over the past months. While Charles had always been serious about his duties, there was now a weariness in his eyes that concerned her deeply. The transition to kingship, combined with personal challenges and the constant pressure of public life, seemed to be taking a toll that few outsiders could understand. Kate, meanwhile, had been observing the family dynamics with her characteristic insight and empathy. Her years as a royal had taught her to read the subtle signs of distress that others might miss. She had watched Anne's protective instincts toward her brother intensify, and she understood the deep love and concern that drove the Princess Royal's sometimes stern exterior. As the evening wore on, Kate found herself positioned between the two siblings during a brief lull in the festivities. The guests were enjoying dinner in the adjoining hall, leaving the three royals with a rare moment of relative privacy. The soft murmur of conversation and the gentle clink of china created a backdrop for what would become one of the most emotionally charged moments any of them had experienced. Charles stood with his hands clasped behind his back, gazing out at the gardens that had been his refuge during countless difficult moments throughout his life. The autumn evening cast long shadows across the manicured lawns, and the sight seemed to deepen his contemplative mood. And remained close by, her protective instincts keeping her within reach, though she respected his need for a moment of quiet reflection. It was then that Kate made a decision that would change everything. She had been watching both siblings, feeling the weight of unspoken emotions that hung between them like a heavy curtain. Her natural inclination toward peacemaking and her deep understanding of family dynamics compelled her to act, even though she knew the risk of overstepping boundaries in such a delicate situation. The conversation that followed began innocuously enough. Charles mentioned his appreciation for the evening's success and the generous donations that had been pledged to their chosen charities, and nodded in agreement, though her eyes remained fixed on her brother with an intensity that spoke of deeper concerns. Kate listened carefully, hearing not just the words being spoken, but the emotions that lay beneath them. The turning point came when Charles, perhaps feeling the safety of the moment, allowed his guard to drop slightly. He spoke of the challenges he faced, not as a king addressing his subjects, but as a man sharing his burden with family members he trusted implicitly. His voice carried a vulnerability that was rarely heard outside the most private family moments. Anne's response was immediate and protective, her natural instinct to shield her brother from any additional pain evident in her posture and tone. She had always been his fierce defender, even when they disagreed on matters of policy or approach. Her loyalty was absolute, and the idea of her brother suffering in silence was unbearable to her. Kate watched this exchange with growing emotion, recognizing the profound love between the siblings and the pain they were both carrying. She understood that sometimes the most powerful gift one person can give another is the acknowledgement of their struggle and the assurance that they are not alone in facing it. The moment that would define the evening was approaching, though none of them realized it yet. Kate's natural empathy and her unique position within the family had given her insights that others might not possess. She could see the exhaustion in Charles's eyes, the worry in Anne's protective stance, and the need for healing that permeated the space between them. As the sounds of the gala continued in the distance, the three royals found themselves in a bubble of intimacy that was rare and precious. The formal protocols that usually governed their interactions seemed to fade away, replaced by the simple human need for connection and understanding. It was in this moment of vulnerability that the foundation was laid for what would become an unforgettable exchange. Kate's decision to speak was not made lightly. She understood the weight of words within the royal family, where every statement could have far-reaching consequences. Yet she also recognized that sometimes silence, however well-intentioned, could be more damaging than the most carefully chosen words. The love she felt for both Charles and her deep respect for their individual struggles gave her the courage to break that silence. The atmosphere in the room shifted subtly as Kate prepared to share what was in her heart, and sensed the change immediately, her attention focusing on her sister-in-law with an intensity born of years of reading family dynamics. Charles, too, seemed to feel the shift, turning from the window to face the two women who had become such important parts of his life. What happened next would be remembered by all three of them as a moment when love transcended protocol, when human emotion broke through royal restraint, and when a few simple words had the power to heal wounds that had been festering in silence. The stage was set for Kate's whispered revelation, though none of them could have anticipated the profound impact it would have on their relationships and their understanding of each other. The evening breeze stirred the curtains gently, as if nature itself was holding its breath in anticipation of what was to come. In the distance, the sounds of the gala continued, but in that moment, for those three people, the rest of the world seemed to fade away, leaving only the truth that was about to be shared and the love that would carry them through its revelation. The silence that followed Kate's decision to speak seemed to stretch endlessly, though in reality only seconds had passed. Charles had turned fully toward them now, his expression open and attentive, while Anne maintained her protective stance, ready to intervene if necessary. The trust between these three family members was about to be tested in ways none of them had anticipated. Kate's voice, when she finally spoke, was barely above a whisper, yet it carried the weight of months of observation and deep concern. She had chosen her moment carefully, recognizing that this might be the only opportunity to share what she had been holding in her heart. The words she spoke were simple, yet they cut through the formal barriers that so often separated the royal family from their deepest emotions. "Charles," she said softly, her eyes meeting his with unwavering sincerity, "you don't have to carry this alone anymore. We see how much you're struggling, and we want you to know that your pain matters to us. You matter to us, not because you're the king, but because you're family, and family means we share both the joy and the burden." The impact of her words was immediate and profound. Charles felt something inside him shift, a wall he had built around his emotions beginning to crumble. For months, he had carried the weight of kingship, personal loss, and family concerns without allowing himself the luxury of vulnerability. Kate's simple acknowledgement of his struggle gave him permission to feel what he had been suppressing, and watch her brother's face transform as Kate's words reached him. She saw the tears that he quickly tried to blink away, the slight tremor in his hands that betrayed how deeply he had been affected. Her own emotions, always carefully controlled, began to surge as she realized how much pain her brother had been hiding, even from her. Kate continued, her voice still soft, but gaining strength from the visible impact of her words. You've given so much of yourself to this role, to the country, to all of us. You've been strong when others needed you to be strong, and wise when decisions seemed impossible to make. But strength doesn't mean you have to face everything alone. The truth of her words resonated through the room like the toll of a distant bell. Charles had indeed carried his burdens in solitude, believing that to show weakness would somehow diminish his ability to lead. The crown had become both his greatest honor and his heaviest burden, and he had never allowed himself to fully acknowledge the toll it had taken on his spirit. "I see how you worry about," and Kate continued, her gaze shifting briefly to the Princess Royal before returning to Charles. "I see how you carry guilt about decisions you've had to make, how you second-guess yourself even when you know you've chosen the right path. And I see how much you miss the simpler times when your biggest concern was tending to your gardens or writing letters to friends," and felt her throat tighten as Kate's words painted a picture of her brother that was both accurate and heart-wrenching. She had sensed his struggles, but hadn't known how to address them without seeming to question his capabilities or add to his burdens. Kate's ability to articulate what they had all been feeling but couldn't express was both a relief and a revelation. Charles found himself unable to speak for a moment, overwhelmed by the accuracy of Kate's observations and the kindness with which she had delivered them. He had not realized how visible his internal struggles had become, nor how much his family had been watching and worrying about him. The isolation he had felt began to lift, replaced by a warmth he had forgotten was possible. "But what I need you to know," Kate said, her voice growing even softer as she delivered what would prove to be the most powerful part of her message, "is that your father would be so incredibly proud of the man you've become and the king you are. He would see the compassion in every decision you make, the wisdom in your approach to impossible situations, and the love you show for your people and your family." The mention of his father hit Charles with unexpected force. Prince Philip had been gone for several years now, but the absence of his guidance and approval still felt fresh. Charles had often wondered whether his father would have approved of his choices, his style of leadership, his handling of family crises. Kate's words offered him something he hadn't realized he desperately needed, the assurance that his efforts were worthy of respect and pride, and felt her own composure beginning to slip as she watched her brother's reaction to Kate's words. She had seen him strong through countless challenges, dignified through public scrutiny, and graceful under pressure. But now she saw him as the little boy she had grown up with, the one who had always sought their father's approval and carried the weight of royal expectations even as a child. "He would see how you've modernized the monarchy while honoring its traditions," Kate continued, her own emotions evident in the slight quiver of her voice. "He would see how you've brought the family together during difficult times, how you've shown leadership that comes from the heart as well as from duty. And he would see how much love you show even when you think no one is watching." The tears that Charles had been fighting could no longer be contained. They fell silently down his cheeks as years of suppressed emotion finally found release. He had not allowed himself to grieve properly for his father, to acknowledge his own need for guidance and approval, or to recognize the magnitude of what he had accomplished since taking the throne, and moved closer to her brother, her own eyes bright with unshed tears. She had always been his protector, but Kate's words had shown her that sometimes protection meant creating space for vulnerability rather than shielding against it. The love she felt for Charles intensified as she saw him allowing himself to feel the full weight of both his losses and his achievements. "The children adore you," Kate added, referring to her own children and the other young royals. "George talks about the stories you tell him. Charlotte lights up when you pay attention to her drawings, and Louis feels so special when you include him in your conversations. You're not just their king, you're their beloved grandfather figure, and they see in you all the warmth and wisdom that sometimes gets hidden behind the formal duties." This revelation about the children's feelings toward him touched Charles in a way that surprised him. He had worried that his royal duties might make him seem distant or intimidating to the younger generation. Learning that they saw him with such affection and respect filled a space in his heart that he hadn't realized was empty. Kate's next words came even more softly, requiring both Charles and to lean in slightly to hear her clearly. "And what your father would be most proud of," she whispered, "is how much you love and how much she loves you. He would see that the bond between you two has only grown stronger through all the challenges you've faced. He would see that you've taken care of each other the way he always hoped you would." The mention of their relationship, the acknowledgement of the deep bond between the siblings, proved to be the moment that finally broke through Anne's carefully maintained composure. Tears began to flow down her cheeks as she was overwhelmed by the truth of Kate's words and the love she felt for her brother. Charles reached for Anne's hand, and she grasped it tightly, both of them finding comfort in the physical connection that represented so much more than simple family affection. They had indeed protected and supported each other through decades of royal life, public scrutiny, personal loss, and family challenges. Kate's recognition of this bond validated something precious that they had never fully articulated. The three of them stood together in that moment, connected by shared emotion and deep understanding. Kate's whispered words had accomplished something that months of formal conversations and royal protocols could never achieve. They had created a space for truth, vulnerability, and healing within the often rigid structure of royal life. The sounds of the gala seemed to fade even further into the background as the weight of Kate's message continued to resonate through the room. She had given Charles permission to acknowledge his struggles while also reminding him of his worth and the love that surrounded him. She had shown and that her protective instincts were appreciated and needed, and she had demonstrated the power of speaking truth with love, even when that truth might be difficult to hear or express. The emotional dam that had been building for months finally burst completely as Anne found herself unable to contain the flood of feelings that Kate's words had unleashed. Years of watching her brother carry impossible burdens, of worrying about his well-being while maintaining her own stoic facade, of loving him fiercely while feeling helpless to ease his pain, all came rushing to the surface in a torrent of tears that surprised even her. Kate moved instinctively toward and, understanding that the Princess Royal was experiencing something she rarely allowed herself: complete emotional vulnerability. The woman who had spent decades being the strongest member of the family, the one others turned to in crisis, was finally allowing herself to feel the full weight of her love and concern for her brother. "I've been so worried about you," and managed to say through her tears, her voice thick with emotion as she looked at Charles. "I watched you struggle and felt so helpless because I didn't know how to help without making things worse. I've seen you carry everything alone, and it's been breaking my heart because I remember when we were children, and I could always protect you from the bullies at school or the criticism from the adults who didn't understand you." Charles felt his own emotions deepen as he heard the pain in his sister's voice, and had always been his champion, fierce and unwavering in her loyalty, but he had never fully understood how much his struggles affected her. The realization that his attempts to spare others his burdens had actually caused them different kind of pain was both humbling and enlightening. "You've always protected me," Charles said softly, his voice rough with emotion. "Even now, even when I'm king and you're supposed to defer to my authority, you still look out for me the way you did when we were young. I don't think I've ever properly thanked you for that, or told you how much your support has meant through all these years." Kate watched the exchange between the siblings with deep emotion, recognizing that her words had opened a door that had been locked for far too long. She saw the healing that was beginning to take place, the way truth and vulnerability were creating space for a deeper connection than even their strong bond had previously allowed. "But I need you to know something else," Kate continued, her voice still gentle, but gaining strength from the positive response to her earlier words. "The way you two love each other, the way you support each other, it's taught William and me so much about what family really means. We see how you put each other first when it matters, how you trust each other completely, and how you never let anything come between your bond." She paused, watching as her words seemed to resonate with both Charles and before continuing with what she knew was perhaps the most important part of her message. "Your father saw that too. He saw how you balanced each other, how in strength complemented your wisdom, how your compassion brought out her gentler side. He used to tell people that his greatest achievement wasn't his naval career or his royal duties, but raising children who truly loved and supported each other." This revelation about their father's feelings toward their relationship hit both siblings with profound impact. They had known he loved them, but they had never heard him express such specific pride in their bond. The knowledge that he had seen and valued their relationship added a layer of validation that neither had realized they needed, and wiped her tears with the back of her hand, a gesture so unlike her usual composed demeanor that it emphasized the depth of her emotional response. "I miss him so much," she said quietly. "I miss being able to ask his advice, miss his terrible jokes at family dinners, miss the way he could make everything seem manageable just by being there." "I miss him too," Charles replied, his own grief evident in his voice. "I miss knowing that no matter what decisions I had to make, I could count on his wisdom and his honest opinion, even when it wasn't what I wanted to hear. I miss the way he could cut through all the ceremony and protocol to get to the heart of what really mattered." Kate felt her own tears forming as she listened to the siblings share their grief so openly. She had known that the loss of Prince Philip had affected the entire family deeply, but she was only now beginning to understand the specific ways in which his absence had left both Charles and feeling uncertain and alone. "But he's not really gone," Kate said softly, her words carrying the weight of deep conviction. "Every time I watch you make a difficult decision with wisdom and compassion, Charles, I see him in you. Every time I see you stand up for what's right, even when it's unpopular, and I see his strength and integrity. He lives on in the values he taught you, in the love you show each other, and in the way you serve your country and your family." The truth of her words seemed to settle over the room like a warm blanket, providing comfort where there had been only grief and uncertainty. Both Charles and felt something shift inside them, a recognition that their father's influence continued to guide them even in his absence. "He would want us to take care of each other," and said, her voice steadier now, but still thick with emotion. "He would want us to lean on each other instead of trying to carry everything alone. He always said that family was the most important thing, more important than duty or tradition or public opinion." Charles nodded, understanding that, and was right, and that their father's lessons about family loyalty were perhaps his most valuable legacy. "He would want us to be honest with each other about our struggles, instead of pretending everything is fine when it isn't," he added. He never had patience for false bravery or unnecessary suffering. Kate smiled through her own tears, seeing the healing that was taking place between the siblings and knowing that her decision to speak had been the right one, despite the risk. "And he would want you both to know that you don't have to be perfect to be worthy of love and respect. He would want you to forgive yourselves for being human, for having moments of doubt or weakness, for needing support and comfort just like everyone else. The weight of this permission to be imperfect, to acknowledge their humanity while still fulfilling their royal duties, was liberating in a way that none of them had anticipated. For so long, both Charles and it felt the pressure to be superhuman, to never show weakness or uncertainty in their public roles. Kate's words reminded them that their value as people wasn't dependent on their ability to be flawless. "I've been so afraid of disappointing him," Charles admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "Every decision I make, every speech I give, every time I represent the crown, I wonder if I'm doing it the way he would want, if I'm living up to the example he set." "You are," and said firmly, her protective instincts reasserting themselves as she saw her brother's vulnerability. "You're exceeding the example he set because you're bringing your own heart and wisdom to the role. He would be amazed by your compassion, by the way you connect with people, by how you've managed to modernize the monarchy while keeping its dignity intact. Kate nodded in agreement, reinforcing Anne's words with her own observations. The people love you not because you're a perfect copy of your father, but because you're authentically yourself while honoring the best of what he taught you. That's exactly what he would have wanted for you. The conversation continued as the three of them began to process not only their grief for Prince Philip, but also their fears about living up to his legacy. Kate's initial whispered words had opened a floodgate not just of tears, but of healing communication that had been desperately needed within the family. As they talked, sharing memories of Prince Philip and discussing their hopes and fears for the future, the bond between all three of them deepened in ways that would have lasting impact on their relationships. They were no longer just fulfilling their royal roles in relation to each other. They were connecting as people who loved and supported each other through life's most challenging moments. The evening had transformed from a formal royal obligation into something far more precious, a moment of genuine family connection that would strengthen them all for whatever challenges lay ahead. As the immediate intensity of their emotional exchange began to settle, the three royals found themselves in a space of profound connection that none of them had experienced in years. The formal barriers that usually defined their interactions had dissolved, replaced by an intimacy born of shared vulnerability and honest communication. Kate's brave decision to speak her heart had created something precious, a moment of pure family love that transcended all protocol and precedent. Charles found himself looking at his sister with new eyes, seeing not just the steadfast princess royal who had always supported him, but the woman who had carried her own burdens while watching over his. Anne's tears had shown him depths of love and concern that she rarely allowed others to see, and he felt both humbled and grateful for the fierce loyalty she had always shown him. And he said softly, his voice still thick with emotion, but stronger now than it had been earlier in the evening, "I want you to know that your strength has been my anchor through every storm we've faced as a family. When everything else felt uncertain, I could always count on you to tell me the truth, to stand by my side, and to remind me of what really matters." And felt fresh tears threaten as she heard the gratitude and love in her brother's voice. Throughout their lives, she had often wondered if her directness and sometimes stern approach had been helpful or burdensome to him. To hear him acknowledge her support as valuable rather than overwhelming was profoundly meaningful to her. "I've never known how to be gentle the way Kate is," Anne replied, glancing gratefully at her sister-in-law before returning her gaze to Charles. "I've always believed that love sometimes means being tough, standing firm, refusing to let the people you care about make mistakes or suffer alone. But watching Kate tonight, seeing how her kindness opened doors that my strength couldn't reach, I realized there are different ways to show love." Kate felt deeply moved by Anne's words, understanding that the Princess Royal was acknowledging something important about the different gifts they each brought to their family relationships. "Your strength and my gentleness aren't opposites," Kate said thoughtfully. "They're complementary. Charles needs both of us in different ways and at different times. There are moments when your fierce protection is exactly what he needs, and there are moments when a softer approach opens doors that strength alone cannot." This insight resonated with all three of them as they began to understand how their different approaches to love and support could work together rather than compete with each other. Charles felt a deep appreciation for both women and the unique ways they had enriched his life and helped him navigate the challenges of royal responsibility. "What happened here tonight," Charles said slowly, "this honesty, this willingness to be vulnerable with each other, this is what Father would have wanted for us. Not perfect performance of our roles, but authentic connection as people who love each other." He paused, looking at both women with deep affection. "I think we've been so focused on doing our duties correctly that we sometimes forget to simply be a family." The truth of his words settled over them as they recognized that royal protocol, while necessary for their public roles, had sometimes created distance in their personal relationships that didn't serve them well. Kate's courage in breaking through that protocol had reminded them that their love for each other was more important than any formal expectations. "I want things to be different going forward," and said, her voice firm but warm. "I want us to have more moments like this, where we can talk honestly about what we're feeling and what we need from each other. I'm tired of pretending that everything is always fine when it isn't, and I'm tired of watching you struggle alone when you don't have to." Charles nodded enthusiastically, feeling a sense of relief at the prospect of more open communication within their family. "I want that too. I want to be able to ask for help when I need it, to share my concerns without feeling like I'm burdening others, and to know that our family bond is strong enough to handle honesty and vulnerability." Kate smiled through her remaining tears, feeling deeply satisfied that her decision to speak had led to such positive changes in the family dynamic. "What if we made a commitment to each other?" she suggested. "A promise that we'll check in with each other regularly, not just about royal duties and public obligations, but about how we're really doing as people. We could create space for honesty and support that doesn't depend on crisis or formal occasions." The idea appealed to both Charles and Anne, who recognized that their current pattern of only discussing personal matters during major family events or emergencies wasn't serving them well. Regular, intentional connection could prevent small concerns from growing into larger problems and ensure that none of them felt isolated in their struggles. "I would love that," Charles said sincerely. "I think it would make all of us stronger, both as individuals and as a family. And I think it would honor Father's memory by living out the values he tried to teach us about the importance of taking care of each other." As they talked about practical ways to maintain better communication and support, the sounds of the gala began to intrude more noticeably into their awareness. They realized that their absence would soon be noticed and that they would need to return to their public roles. However, the transformation that had taken place between them would continue long after the evening ended. "Before we go back," Kate said softly, "I want to say one more thing. Tonight has shown me how much strength there is in our family, how much love we have for each other, and how much we can accomplish when we're willing to be honest and vulnerable together. Whatever challenges we face in the future, we'll face them as a united family." Charles and both felt the truth of her words resonate in their hearts. The evening had indeed strengthened their bond and given them new tools for supporting each other through future difficulties. They had discovered that vulnerability, far from being a weakness, could actually be a source of tremendous strength when shared within a loving family. As they prepared to return to the gala, and took a moment to embrace both Kate and Charles, expressing through her actions the love that had been affirmed and deepened through their conversation. Charles followed suit, holding both women close and feeling more supported and understood than he had in months. "Thank you," he whispered to Kate as they prepared to leave. "Thank you for having the courage to say what needed to be said, and thank you for reminding us of what we mean to each other." Kate smiled warmly, feeling deeply grateful that her risk had paid off so beautifully. "Thank you for trusting me enough to be vulnerable," she replied. "And thank you both for showing me what real family love looks like." When they finally rejoined the gala, guests who were paying close attention might have noticed that the three royals seemed more relaxed and connected than they had earlier in the evening. There was an easiness in their interactions, a warmth in their smiles when they looked at each other, and a sense of genuine happiness that hadn't been present before. The evening concluded successfully from a public perspective, with significant funds raised for charity and positive media coverage of the royal family's continued commitment to worthy causes. However, for Charles and Kate, the real success of the evening had nothing to do with public perception or charitable donations. The real victory was the healing and strengthening of family bonds that had been tested by time, pressure, and grief. In the weeks and months that followed, the three of them kept their promise to maintain better communication and support for each other. Their relationship became a source of strength that helped them all navigate future challenges with greater confidence and resilience. Kate's whispered words had indeed changed everything, creating a foundation of openness and love that would sustain their family through whatever the future might bring. The memory of that evening, of Anne's tears, and Charles's vulnerability, and Kate's courageous honesty, became a touchstone for all of them. Whenever they faced difficult moments in the future, they could remember that night when love conquered protocol, when truth healed old wounds, and when a family discovered that their greatest strength lay not in their individual roles, but in their connection to each other. Prince Philip would indeed have been proud, not just of their individual accomplishments, but of their willingness to love each other honestly and completely. His greatest lesson about the importance of family had been learned and lived out in the most beautiful way possible, ensuring that his legacy would continue through their love for each other for generations to come.